Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. Postpartum. When I think of that word, I almost feel like I didn't have a postpartum experience. I know that sounds ridiculous because postpartum literally means after birth, and I did give birth to my child, obviously, but he was born so early. So I almost didn't feel like I was completely pregnant because I wasn't. I delivered in the middle of the second trimester at 24 weeks and 5 days, just about a month before the third trimester begins. And then he was taken away from me because the hospital staff had to save his life, while I spent, I think it was somewhere between 2 and 3 hours trying to go from lying with my feet above my head to sitting up without passing out before I could see him for the first time. And then from there, I had a couple days in the hospital where I had to train my legs to walk again because I had been off of them for so long. I'd lost so much muscle mass. And then I went to go see him when I could. And then after that, I went into a full-time job. It became a full-time job of going from home to the NICU, spending 12, 13 hours a day there, watching him, caring for him, learning about him, talking to him, reading to him, pumping on top of all of that, the little tiny droplets of milk that I could get, and then coming home, going to bed, and doing it all over again for 109 days. And one of the things that stands out from that time, which is technically postpartum, it is postpartum, but it doesn't feel like it because it didn't look like how I thought it would look, with us bonding and having time together, and none of that happened, right? And it was hard and it was stressful and it was busy. But one of the things that stands out was how much I was craving sweets. I don't have a sweet tooth. I don't like sweet things. I prefer salty or savory foods or dark chocolate if I can have it. But I remember at that time, I would crave sweets. I would eat anything that was sweet anywhere around me. And I never really understood why. Was it the stress of having a child fight for his life? And maybe that's why my body was like, you need the sugar. Was it because I was trying to breastfeed and I was getting, I was producing milk. It wasn't very much. He was also very tiny. And so for a while it worked, but was it that? I don't know. But one thing I do know for sure is that I did not eat very well because there was no time. I did not prepare for the postpartum period because we didn't know when he would be born. We hadn't even thought that far. So I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't eat that well. We had lovely friends who dropped off food for us throughout the NICU stay, who came by and just left it on our doorstep and said, here, don't even bother. Don't even worry about us coming in. It's there for you when you get home from the hospital. So, so nice. And those were really the best meals that we had because otherwise I was eating at the hospital. I had some wonderful friends drop off some care packages of snacks that I would take with me, but it wasn't this nutritious, nourishing experience that I knew I wanted postpartum, but it just wasn't practical. But the reality is what you put in your body postpartum matters just as much, if not more, than when you're pregnant. And so I'm super, super excited about today because we are talking about postpartum nutrition. Whether you are at home with baby, whether you're in the NICU with baby, or whether you're pregnant right now and you're preparing for delivery, whenever that delivery might happen, this is going to be an amazing conversation with my friend and colleague, Lily Nichols. She is a registered dietitian nutritionist, certified diabetes educator, researcher, and author with a passion for evidence-based prenatal nutrition and exercise. Her best-selling book, Real Food for Gestational Diabetes, an online course of the same name, presents a revolutionary nutrient-dense, low-carb diet for managing gestational diabetes. And her unique approach hasn't only helped tens of thousands of women manage their gestational diabetes, most of them without the need for blood sugar-lowering medication, but it's also influenced nutritional policies internationally. And she's on today because she's coming out with a second book, Real Food for Pregnancy, which outlines the problems with current prenatal nutrition guidelines and provides the evidence with 920 citations and counting, which totally speaks to my researcher heart. And it supports a real food diet to optimizing maternal and fetal health. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome, Lily.
Thank you so much for having me, Parijat.
This is amazing. We've had you on before once to talk about gestational diabetes specifically. But when I heard about this book that you've been working on, you've poured your heart and soul into it. And I knew that you were writing about what happens after baby's born. I knew we had to have you back because this is something we do not talk about enough. And you even say it in your book that we just assume once baby's born, everything goes back to normal. And that's totally not how it is.
Not at all.
Oh my gosh. So before we jump in, I have like 728 questions for you. But before we do that, how did you get involved in this field of perinatal nutrition?
Prenatal nutrition or perinatal nutrition is something that I've had an interest in for a while, actually. I was really, before I even started nutrition school, I was pretty fascinated by, the diets of traditional cultures and what they ate and how certain foods were prized during pregnancy and why that might be. I just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
Fast forward to finishing my degree, finishing my training out in the world, working, and I had an opportunity to work with the California Diabetes and Pregnancy Program, which works with any type of diabetes in pregnancy, but mostly gestational diabetes. So high blood sugar in pregnancy from whatever the cause, whatever the reason. And it was there that I learned even more about how just something as simple as, maybe not as simple, but one tiny factor, just blood sugar management in pregnancy, can affect a baby and can affect them for the rest of their life. So if a mother doesn't have very well controlled blood sugar, her baby faces a much higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes or obesity later in life. Like it literally changes how their pancreas functions and how their metabolism is set up for life. It was like wild. So that really got me going in this field. And that's where, you mentioned my first book, Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. It was working in that role that I was able to see, how do the conventional guidelines, the ones that I helped set up, actually working in my public policy position, how do those work in the real world?
Yeah.
And oops, those don't work as well as I expected. Like probably the worst thing to feel as a practitioner that you're like not helping women. So instead of thinking these women had failed diet therapy, as they call it in practice, I was like, well, maybe the diet's failing them. Maybe we can do something better. So that led me to kind of incorporate that whole background of what were traditional cultures eating and why, like where do we get the nutrients most important for a healthy pregnancy, and also take into account blood sugar management and kind of combine forces to have a lower carbohydrate, more nutrient dense diet for managing gestational diabetes. And it works very well. So after I published that book, I didn't know if it would be anything people would want to read. I just wanted to get it out there into the world and give women some hope and also give healthcare practitioners, all the evidence to back up that this way of doing things is another approach, and it's evidence-based. And shortly after I published that book, it became pretty popular. And within a couple months, I was getting practitioners being like, hey, I know this is good for women who have blood sugar issues, but isn't this also good for women without blood sugar issues? And like, yes, great. Absolutely. A nutrient dense diet is important for all pregnant women. And there's, some good evidence on even the benefits of having well-controlled blood sugar for all women, regardless of if there's an official diagnosis of any sort of diabetes going on. So it became a little awkward because, midwives and doctors, OBGYNs, they'd be giving out my book and be like, hey, you don't have gestational diabetes, but eat this way. and everyone was asking me like, will you write another book? Will you write another book? But, I had a baby within a year of publishing Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. So I didn't have the mental bandwidth to work on a book at that point, but I started looking at the other prenatal nutrition books on the market to see if there was one I could recommend. And there wasn't. It was like you had two camps. You had the ones that just rehashed the conventional guidelines, which I have issues with because some of the recommendations on foods especially foods to avoid, prevent you from getting some of the nutrients that are really important for fetal development and avoidance of pregnancy complications. And then on the other hand, you have these other books which are touting something different, but have zero citations to back up what they say. So you don't know how much of it you can believe or not. And so I was like, we got to find some middle ground here. So eventually, after my son was, I guess he was around 10 months when I started writing, I finally started working on this other book. And I think by the time this interview goes live, it'll be out into the world. So
yes,
pretty excited to bring real food for pregnancy out. No longer will practitioners have to say, eat like this book, you don't have gestational diabetes. They could say, hey, you're pregnant, read this book, and no disclaimer will be required.
Right. And I can tell already, because I've gotten a sneak peek of the book, it is going to take the world by storm. It is going to change the way women are exposing themselves and what they understand about their pregnancy and what they put in their bodies. I know it's going to completely change that whole field. So thank you for writing this book, because it is so, so needed.
I appreciate the compliment. I'll just soak it in.
Yes, take it in. So we're talking specifically today, for those of you that want to know more about gestational diabetes, Lily was on Delivering Miracles a little while back. And so we're going to link that episode in the show notes here so you can listen to that one as well, because that was also super amazing. But today we're talking about postpartum. So what happens after baby's born? And one of the things that I read in your book that I loved and really stood out to me was talking about warming foods and why they're so important to eat. And you cite so many different cultures that highlight the importance of eating warming food after you've had a baby. And being Indian, this is a culture that I come from, where everybody's about food that warms your body up. It's something I grew up with, so it's very familiar to me, but I know a lot of people are not familiar with what that is. So can you talk to us a little bit about what are warming foods and why are they so important postpartum?
Sure. Yeah, I was really excited to start reading more about what all these cultures all over the world do postpartum, because when you go through postpartum in America, you're like completely unsupported and there's no rules.
Yes.
There's no like traditional rules around what to eat. It's just like, eat whatever, you'll be fine.
Good luck. You'll be fine.
Yeah. But you look, across India, across Asia, in the Middle East, South America, a lot of different parts of the world have very specific practices to follow in the early postpartum period. And it's often somewhere between 20 to 40 days. Most of them are close to 40 days, which lines right up with about that 6-week early postpartum period that even in, Western culture, we sort of set aside as like a healing phase. And all of these cultures have different recommendations on food, of course, because there's no two ways of eating that are identical. Like if you live in one part of the world, there's different food growing than in another part of the world, and different spices are used and cooking techniques and whatnot. But a lot of them really emphasize warming foods. So in China, there's this yin and yang, sort of this like black and white, hot and cold sort of principle that's pretty common and prevalent in like traditional Chinese medicine. And it's believed that in early postpartum, your body is like in a yin state. It's cold and you need more yang, warming foods to help heal. And so in that culture, warming foods are, yes, things that are actually warm, like warm soups and warm teas. They even recommend tea over having cold water. And you'll see that. I think that's the case in India as well. You confirm, you know more than me.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Recommending warm milk, not cold milk. Oftentimes foods that are higher in protein and more fatty, like, organ meats, bone broths made with there's one called pig trotter soup. That's pretty common in parts of China. In Korea, they do a warm seaweed soup. They're highly nutrient dense and provide a lot of the nutrients that your body actually needs when it's healing, like connective tissues are changing. Maybe you were cut or maybe your perineum tore during birth. It provides a lot of those foods that actually support the healing of those tissues. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to give a very specific definition of warm and cold foods because it differs in different cultures. But I'll say the two foods that might be kind of surprising to us in Western culture that tend to be on the no-no list are a lot of raw fruits and vegetables. So when fruits and vegetables are included, they're usually included cooked, and they're often included in, sometimes they have specifics on which ones are allowed or not allowed. So like cucumber is a no-no. I know in parts of South America, like no fruits are allowed for the first 40 days, except like acai berries. For whatever reason, those are not considered cooling. So you kind of, it's hard for me to give us like a super specific list because some of them contradict each other, but generally it's like high fat, high protein, and then physically warming. Sometimes there's an emphasis on spices that are warming. So, you know, chilies, cinnamon, cardamom, some of the like paprika, cumin, those tend to be more warming, just by default. You kind of know when you have chilies, you feel warmer. So some of those things are emphasized in cultures as well.
So true. So true. And I love that the idea behind it is to help your body do what it's trying to do naturally, which is to heal. And it just enhances that whole process. So I know some of our listeners are going to go, but I love fruits, or vegetables are so good for me, or I am so hot right now, I can't stand the idea of eating hot food. Is it okay if I drink ice water? Is it okay if I have some of these raw fruits and vegetables? Is this going to hurt my healing process? What do you say to that?
That's a very good question. And I honestly don't think it will. I think some of these practices some of them are age old. So we have to kind of adapt them to our modern life. I didn't know nearly as much about all these traditions when I went through my postpartum healing with my son. And so I had like fruit smoothies and I definitely had some raw vegetables. Like everything was fine. I think the idea of keeping a mother and baby warm is pretty central to all of them. And I think part of that stems from the fact that before we were in modern hygienic modern medicine is available sort of conditions, there were legitimate concerns over a mother or infant getting cold or being exposed to harsh weather and thus getting sick and passing. Like infant mortality was kind of a big deal, and in still some parts of the world is a big deal. Nowadays, I think it's a little less of a concern given that we generally have like reliable shelter and adequate clothing and heat. So any, 0.5 degree drop in your body temperature from having a fruit smoothie probably is not going to be a big deal because you're in a warm house. But if you're in a setting with a drafty house and bad weather or unreliable shelter, like you want to do everything possible to keep yourself warm.
Absolutely.
So I think we have to take them with a little bit of grain of salt, but I think we can also, definitely to give it some weight in terms of the nutrients that a lot of these foods provide, and also what sorts of things bring you comfort, even from an emotional level, because a lot of the foods that are emphasized are very, like, it's like being wrapped in a warm blanket. When you come home to comfort food, it's usually not like a green salad with raw vegetables, right? Comfort food is like a hearty stew, a hearty thing of mac and cheese, or, it's
a warm curry.
Exactly, like warm and gooey, and often there's like a sort of heavier cooked starch in there as well. It's not just, meat and stuff, but often there's like some rice or some cooked potatoes, or that's just the idea almost you want to have around food. So what is really nourishing to you? Like to me at the time when I needed so much energy just for nursing, the idea of a fruit smoothie was convenient, but also like really delicious and nourishing too. So I think on that level, at least emotionally, that fit the bill, even though it was cooling.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I think just take pieces of it, but don't feel like you're going to hurt anything if you have some raw fruits or veggies.
Yes, absolutely. And now as you're talking about this, we're talking about bowls of mac and cheese and curry and rice and all that. I know a lot of our listeners are going, that sounds great. That actually sounds really good. I kind of want some right now. But I've got all this weight I need to lose. I've got all that baby weight I need to shed, and I can't afford to eat like that. What are your thoughts?
You can and you should allow yourself to eat that way. For a couple reasons. One is the nutrient repletion that you need to have postpartum. So a lot of women assume that nutrition during pregnancy is what matters most. And like once baby is born, you're off the hook. You can eat whatever you want, or, it doesn't matter because you're no longer growing a baby. So like, we're good. for mothers who are nursing, nutrient needs are actually highest when you're breastfeeding.
That was a big surprise for me.
Pregnancy.
I remember that. I remember hearing that I need more nutrients and I need more calories when I was pumping in the NICU. And I was really surprised about that.
Yeah. So the general gist, and I'm usually not much of a numbers person, but just to give you an idea of how much more it is, when you're pregnant, your calorie needs go up by maybe 300 calories a day. And while you're breastfeeding, your calorie needs are up by 500 calories a day. So that's a 200 calorie boost. I felt like it was significantly more because I felt like the healing process from birth, you've just run a marathon or been through major surgery or maybe both or combination. And your body needs actually a lot of nourishment in those early weeks. I felt like I felt like I needed to eat double. It probably wasn't actually double, but it definitely felt that way. You're very hungry.
Yes.
Also, if you're nursing, well, even if mothers aren't nursing, you still need that early replenishment, like hardcore. So I would give yourself several months of just, I don't want to say eat whatever you want, because the choices that you make and like the nutrient density of the foods you make is important because the nutrition is important for healing, but also just quantity wise, you do need more food for a period of time. And your appetite will tell you how much you need. Like for mothers who are breastfeeding, your appetite will be much higher than mothers who are not breastfeeding, at least after the initial healing phase. And so you just want to honor your hunger when you're choosing like the amount of food you eat. And I also believe that it's important to be eating quality food because we want to be getting lots of nutrients to help with wound healing, to help the uterus, shrink back to its former size. It just did like the most crazy feat of growing so big to hold a baby and grow a baby. And now it needs to shrink back like relatively rapidly. There's actually nutrients that are important to speed that process along. There's nutrients that are transferred into the breast milk, which reflect what a mother eats. So it's important to be thinking quality, but also quantity for a period of time. And, it took 9 months. Well, I know for some women who are delivering prematurely, it was a little less than 9 months, or maybe a lot less than 9 months, but many months, let's say, to grow this baby. And it often takes many months for your body to return to its former-ish size. It's never exactly the same, but for it to come back down to when you feel a little more normal in your clothes, that takes a really long time. And so you don't want to rush the weight loss thing. And I think a lot of women kind of shoot themselves in the foot by getting undernourished and even in a way overstressed. It's very stressful on your body to not be getting enough food and then run into other health problems later on because of that. So
that's so true. I can speak from experience that because I delivered so preterm, I was back in my pre-pregnancy pants in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But my body, even though the size was the same, my body wasn't the same still. Yeah. I needed to heal. Your focus on healing is so important. I needed to rebuild so many muscles that I had lost. I needed to rebuild my bone strength. I needed to rebuild just generally feeling healthier because I didn't have the energy that I did before because of how long I'd been on bed rest. Yes. So even for those of you that are listening that have delivered preterm who are like, I have no evidence that I had a baby, which is a whole other conversation we can have about the grief and loss of how quickly you get your body back in that way. Please know that the nutrition is not just about losing weight, but it's really about becoming healthier again and being strong enough to take care of this little baby.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that I really tried to do in the postpartum chapter, was to bring it back to take like self-care and nourishing yourself and healing more than anything else. Because I think, it's tricky. It's like I kind of walk this fine line of these nutrients are important and these foods are important for these reasons. And yet real world syndrome sets in and you're like, I have no time to cook. I have no time to care for myself. I have no time to X, Y, and Z. At the end of the day, the better cared for a mom is postpartum, the better able she is to care for her baby and the better able she is to heal and feel like herself again quicker. And so it's really like a radical act of self-care to arrange to have people bring you meals, to arrange to have help in the kitchen, to sometimes you don't have the time. Like I didn't deliver preterm, but I delivered earlier than I expected. And I didn't have an array of freezer meals ready. And I was kicking myself that I didn't have that. But if you have, friends and family who can do a meal train and bring you foods, you can even, a lot of these services like mealtrain.com or .org or Bring Them a Meal, you can actually set up like specific things if you have like allergies or any specifics on foods that you want people to bring you. You can actually list food preferences and stuff in there. So people aren't just bringing you like cookies and muffins all day. Those are great, but like sometimes it gets people take the comfort food thing to the next level.
Right, a little too far.
I actually need real food here. Anything you could do to like surround yourself with a system of support, especially around food, because you're not going to be up and cooking anytime soon.
No,
if everything goes well with your birth, you're just not going to be up on your feet cooking right away, like period. So
absolutely. And I love that you highlight that so often in that chapter specifically, just to give people realistic expectation that don't go there. Like it's not worth it. That's not what your baby needs. It's not what you need. Like right now is not the time to be busting out 5-course meals, even though you're so good at it, but now's not the time.
Right. It's hard too, especially for those of us who like to cook. I love to cook, and it was hard to not be cooking. Mm-hmm. And if you have family members who are like really good at just taking charge and just like getting in the kitchen and cooking and not needing your input on what to cook, way better than having somebody who's like, do you want this? How do you want me to prepare this? You just don't have the mental space to.
Oh my gosh, no.
That. You just need somebody to come in and cook. It almost doesn't even matter what it is. You just want to eat.
Yes.
And it's really easy with all the work that goes into breastfeeding, and honestly, double the amount of work that goes into pumping. Hats off to any of the women who are pumping. I just think that is the hardest thing in the world.
Yes.
You don't have the time or the energy or the mental bandwidth to be thinking about everything that goes into cooking a meal and what you want. You just need people to bring you food, because it's actually really easy to forget to eat. Your brain is so in this like weird infant care survival mode that you like all energy by default like goes to baby, and then you'll be like suddenly find yourself completely famished and be like, oh, when was the last time I ate? And then it was like way too long ago. Or even if it was recently, you're so hungry from breastfeeding that you want food right away. Now you need it now.
Yeah. Well, that's a really great segue to my next question, which is related to having a baby in the NICU, because this happens so much to preemie moms. I remember living it too, which is exactly what you said, that your entire focus is on the baby. And depending on how early the baby is or what the circumstances are, it's not just about baby being okay, but it's about baby literally surviving. And I can't tell you how often I hear from NICU moms that I work with going, if one more person tells me to take care of myself, I'm going to punch them in the throat. Like, I don't have time for this. I can't do this. Yeah. And yet, having personally been through it, I also know that you're right. You get really hungry and you have to eat. And if you want to provide milk for your baby, which I totally know is not always possible, but if you want to and you want to try, having good nutrition is a huge part of that. But then how do you do that when you aren't allowed to eat bedside and you want to be right there with the baby all day long? What do you do? What are your suggestions on how to get these nutrients when baby's in the NICU?
Oh my gosh. I didn't even have a kiddo in the NICU, and I can so relate to being frustrated at the people saying, take care of yourself. I'm like, how do I take care of myself? There's like no time or energy to take care of myself. I have a whole section in the book called How Will You Rest, Recover, and Receive Support? Because more than anything, and something that's central to pretty much all of the traditional cultures that I looked at in researching this section of the book, there was a period of time where mothers were mothered by other people. You were not expected to do it alone, particularly in those first 40 days. And I'd imagine for a baby that's in the NICU, you probably need to like double that amount of time or maybe more. You need a system of support. And in lieu of that system of support, you need to get really creative with how you're going to receive that support. So meals that are delivered, hiring a postpartum doula or somebody who can cook for you and bring you food, like I said, can somebody arrange like a meal train for you? I was really surprised. I was living in, I moved with my husband's job, and I was living in a small community that I'd only lived there for like a year and a half. So I had a system of support, but it's not the same thing as like living in your hometown that you grew up with aunts and uncles everywhere. I was literally living on an island in Alaska. Okay. So I was really surprised though that one of my friends set up a meal train for me, and I had strangers, like dropping off food at my door.
That
every
is so
night.
sweet.
Yeah, it was crazy. Some of the people, I didn't even know some of them. I mean, it was insane and so helpful, because it took, usually they bring enough portions that it would carry over to provide a lunch for the next day, or sometimes even 3 meals. So that was huge. I literally could not have done it without that. In lieu of that, I'm just trying to think outside the box. Like if you know there's some prepackaged frozen dinners that are good quality and you like them, you could have somebody run to the grocery store and get you some of those and just, nuke them right there. Get super creative with how you're going to receive support. I do think I remember imagining like, oh my gosh, if I was a single mother, I don't know how I would do it. It's just not built into our DNA to have 1 or even 2 primary caregivers caring for an infant and then caring for themselves. I just don't think it's normal. Like, is it possible? Totally. Yes, people do it all the time, but
at what cost though?
At what cost? It's so much easier to burn out. It's so much harder, and there's a lot more pre-planning and creativity that goes into the process. So I would just, as much as you can, try to find some network of support and or somebody to deliver food to the hospital. There's even people, if you do have like a spouse or, a family member nearby who can, a lot of these grocery stores allow you to order groceries online and then pick them up. That would be another possibility, where you do curbside pickup. I think it's like a nominal fee, $5 or something, but you don't even have to have the person be away for too long from you. They can just like leave quickly, get the food, come back to the hospital, and not have to spend that extra half hour, 45 minutes or whatever, perusing the grocery store aisles. That might be another option. Just however you can do it. I don't have a perfect answer.
Yeah. No, I think these are really great suggestions. And I'll even say, for those of you who are in the NICU and are in your early days in the NICU, I know that I couldn't really step away to have a real meal until he was stable, which was like a little over 2 months after he was born. And so going back to what Lily was saying earlier, make sure that whatever you put in your mouth is as nutritionally dense as absolutely possible. Because I know you only have 5 minutes sometimes between feedings, between cares, between going to the bathroom and like to getting a breath of fresh air. Whatever you put in, try to get it as nutritionally dense as possible, so that even if you just have time for like 6 snacks throughout the day, you're putting in as much as you possibly can. And it really takes a mind shift to realize it's not just you being lazy or taking time away or being whatever it is that you're telling yourself. What you're doing is you're fueling your body to be able to help your baby.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll add one more funny thing. This is just a practical tip. Oftentimes you only have one hand free to eat, because inevitably baby needs to eat right when you're eating. It just always happens.
Yeah.
So I found it really helpful to have meals that could be eaten with one hand. So like meatloaf, for example, sticks together quite well and stays on a fork easily, and you're not spilling it everywhere. If you're having, a chicken or a steak or something, have somebody cut it up into bite-sized pieces for you. I know soup is really good, but I also found soup a little bit challenging, because I'd be like dripping, you're like leaning over the table-ish with holding a baby, trying not to irritate your scar or your wound. And it's kind of awkward. You don't want to spill hot soup on your baby. So I actually found like casserole type dishes, meatloaf, fish doesn't need a knife, or like protein and veggies that were pre-cut up for me and would stay on a fork.
Yeah.
That was really helpful.
Yeah.
And then like snacks, easily accessible snacks that don't need refrigeration, or maybe things like nuts or beef jerky. Those things were very filling dried fruit. I know it's fruit and everything, but like I was so hungry. I just needed like everything.
Yes.
So I had like a trail mix thing that I'd keep next to me where I'd be nursing, and plenty of fluids as well. So, you know, your water, your tea, or even a hot cocoa. I know that's kind of common. Warm milk, maybe.
Yeah, totally.
Keep those nearby handy, and you can just, you know, grab that as a snack, even if you're not having a full on meal.
Absolutely. I was also not above being fed, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
Because I remember when my son came home, and it was very early on, and I'd be holding him. Like you said, they always seem to eat at the same time. And I was trying to train my body to keep up with his needs. I couldn't breastfeed, but I was pumping. And so I would pump while feeding him a bottle. And so that would take up so much of my body to do that.
How did you do that?
So my mom, I remember several days would come and sit next to me, or my husband would sit next to me and just shove food in my mouth. It was like this train of food that was happening. But hey, you know what? Whatever you got to do, right?
That is huge. Wow. Pumping is so, like I said, hats off to any woman who can pump for any amount of time. I found it so challenging.
It is so hard.
Challenging.
It is so hard.
Yeah.
And leaning into that, then kind of going with that topic, what are some, because I know a lot of women get, especially those that are listening to this podcast, are really into supplements. So they, you know, maybe they've bought into this idea of food and nutrition. Okay, got it. What else can women be taking supplement wise, especially if they're breastfeeding or pumping, or even if they're not, to kind of aid this healing that they're going through?
Yeah, a big one that I'll mention, which like half fits into the supplement category and half fits into the food category, is gelatin or collagen protein, which have become kind of popular in the real food paleo-ish world. And that's because those proteins provide the specific amino acids that your body needs to heal connective tissues, especially glycine and proline. Both of these are involved in collagen formation. And so if you have torn or have had a surgical birth, you have a lot of layers of tissue that need to heal and come back together. Even outside of those things, even if you had, you know, a vaginal delivery, no tears, you know, all in all, an easy situation, your uterus is still shrinking back. Your skin is still coming back to its former size. And by golly, that takes a really long time too. You know, all of these tissues are changing. Your joints and ligaments that have changed during pregnancy to help accommodate space for the baby to grow and or to be birthed, those things need to adjust as well. So there's a huge need to support your connective tissues and skin in healing. And collagen and gelatin protein are huge.
Is that a vegan friendly option?
It is derived from animal products.
So no go.
So
for
no go. I'll get into that in just a minute, but gelatin and collagen are found in high amounts in the bone, skin, and connective tissues of animals. And when you look at what a lot of these traditional cultures would eat, it was bone broth, pig trotter soup, a whole chicken. Chicken soup is super highly recommended in certain parts of South America. That was like almost the exclusive food to be eaten during the first week after birth in certain cultures.
Anything chicken soup can't do? I mean, it's just like the superfood of anything.
Exactly.
When you're healing.
Exactly. And you think of like a lot of these traditional curries even are made with like bone-in cuts of meat that like get all delicious, you know, as it cooks down, and those provide the gelatin and collagen protein. I'm just thinking for women who maybe can't have those foods or have them as often because they're in a NICU setting, you can get gelatin or collagen powder. I'd recommend collagen powder because it doesn't gelatinize, it stays liquid, and you can add that to like a drink or add that to a soup to like boost that nutritional content.
Oh, I wish I'd known about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of women who have been through, you know, several pregnancies and haven't had as big of a focus on that, and then get uber focused on getting like high collagen foods, high glycine foods in their diet, and or supplementing with collagen protein postpartum. And they say it's a world of difference in healing. Like, you know, wounds heal way faster. Your skin heals faster. Sometimes even like stretch marks and things. Some women are able to avoid it during pregnancy, but they often can be lessened by these nutrients because these are involved in those, you know, collagen proteins coming back together and the skin tightening back up.
Yeah.
for women who don't do animal foods, the richest source of glycine is in the animal food world. It's still about probably 2/3 less than any of the animal food sources. But the best one for those women would be spirulina protein. So spirulina or spirulina algae powder. So spirulina is a blue-green algae, and it happens to be one of the few non-animal sources that's pretty high in glycine. So I definitely recommend that. Maybe you could add it to shakes or something. It's kind of green, kind of slimy, but it's actually super, super nutritious. So if you want to go there, you could do that.
There you go. I love that. I love that. For those of you that are listening and who've joined us today, I hope you see that you can help yourself heal postpartum physically from all that your body has gone through from the delivery, and that you can do that by what you put in your body. And you don't have to be perfect with it. Just as long as you are focused on getting as much nutrition as possible, getting enough calories as possible, and let your body do what it needs to do to heal, to help you take care of your little baby. Lily, what are your final words of hope for women who are healing right now after childbirth and listening in?
Well, let me first say, I only mentioned one supplement, so there are more, but I'll leave it at that. There are more things I recommend. At the very least, continue taking your prenatal vitamin, at least the first 6 months postpartum. Very important for nutrient repletion. I'll leave it at that. There's more nutrients. Final parting words. I would say for sure, find a way to rest, recover, and receive support. And that can look very different depending on the circumstances surrounding your birth and what sort of family situation you have or friend support system, where you're located, and so many other variables. I just wish there was more emphasis on that in like prenatal education than there is. I feel like there's so much focus on birth, planning for your nursery to look really cute, and then there's like no emphasis on what a mom can do for herself or how she can find support. I feel like people just sort of shy away from how legitimately life-changing it is to have a baby. You get a lot of this, just you wait, but you don't get any, which just makes you scared of the whole process, right? But you don't get any like real life. I just wish people would be more forthcoming with like, okay, your job, like every woman wants to be a superwoman, right? You feel like that's almost your job. When you have a baby, it's just like, oh, well, I have to do it all because everybody tells you to do it all and lean in and have a career and have a baby and have all this stuff going on at one time. And we really need to slow down as much as we can, given our circumstances in this early time, and lean on the people around us to help out.
I love that.
Even if it's a stranger or a service you need to hire, we need that. We need that support. And just give yourself a lot of time. And it's okay if you get nothing done throughout the entire day other than feeding yourself and feeding your baby.
Yes.
That's okay.
That's like
that's time and a half. And it's going to be round the clock for a long time. So you just have to like lower your expectations on what you'll actually be able to accomplish for many, many months after having a baby. And that's not only okay, that is a radical act of self-care.
Yes.
So self-care is sometimes not doing anything extra to care for yourself, but taking things off of your plate so there's just less required of you. And that's okay.
I love that. Self-care is not about doing more, but sometimes it's about taking things off of your plate. Oh my God, that needs to be on a slogan somewhere on some billboard where every one of us can see this. And so, yes, you have so much amazing information in this book. Where can people find you and this brand new book that you have written?
Yeah, you can learn more about the book at realfoodforpregnancy.com. I am giving away the first chapter for free for anyone who just wants to get a feel for it, see if you like the way I talk about things or not. You know, you can decide if you want to purchase a copy, but you can get a free copy over at the website. And yeah, you can find me on all the usual social media channels as well.
Awesome. And all of this is going to be linked in the show notes. So those of you that are listening, you'll have easy access. It's just one click away. Lily, thank you so much for being here. I could talk to you for an entire day about everything. I know we had such little time to go over so much information, but I so appreciate the work you do, the passion that you bring to the field, and just what you're doing to help women have healthier pregnancies and be healthy after baby is born.
My pleasure. And thank you for filling a void in the market, because there are so few practitioners. I can call you a practitioner because you are. Mm-hmm. There are so few practitioners who have that real world experience that you have, and also remind women how important it is to take care of themselves during and after pregnancy, especially taking care of their mental health. And that's something that is also, we didn't even touch upon, but that is huge. So thank you for filling that void.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And we're going to have you back again because there's just so much to talk about. So thank you so much, Lily.
Too much. Thank you.
Oh, this was amazing. You guys, I was just watching the clock going, I can't believe it's already been 45 minutes. There's so much. I mean, the chapter alone on postpartum nutrition is so packed with information. I mean, look how much she gave us on just one supplement for postpartum healing. And there's like 10 others in there that she talks about and why it's so important. And that's supplements alone. She talks about food. She talks about self-care. She talks about how to have a healthy pregnancy by what you put in your body. And when you've put real food in your body, so much can change. So much can change. I know how hard it is when you are pregnant, and especially when you've got pregnancy complications. And then when you've got a baby in the NICU, it is so freaking hard to remember to eat well. That's not your fault. That's not something you're doing wrong. The circumstances are that hard. And I hope you've taken away from this episode today that it can be a really simple tweak to accommodate into your circumstances, to be able to give your body the nourishment it needs to heal from what you've been through, so you can give more to your baby. Because the reality is, you can help yourself heal postpartum with what you put in your body. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to eat perfectly. But as long as you focus on making sure it is nutrient dense, you are going to do amazing things for your body, so you can be right there for your baby, whether baby's in the NICU or baby's at home. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And if you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, I would love it if you can head over to iTunes and leave a review so more women who are going through a high-risk pregnancy or who are in the postpartum period and want to know how to heal and want to know how to eat better can tune into this episode of Delivering Miracles and listen to other episodes of Delivering Miracles to receive the inspiration and tips and advice on how to have a healthy pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. And if you are experiencing gestational diabetes right now, I would love it if you head over to my website to check out a mini workshop that Lily and I actually did some time back on how to eat your way through gestational diabetes. By registering, you're going to discover how to improve your health and manage your gestational diabetes by the foods that you eat without following crazy diets that keep messing with your blood sugar and following Lily's really groundbreaking advice. You can register for that workshop at parijatdeshpande.com/masterclass. Masterclass is just one word. Also, I would love to stay in touch, so follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Parijat Desh. That's PARIJATDESH. You've got this. You've got this. I know it's hard. I know once you've got a baby, everything else melts away. And it's about this little tiny miracle. Know that everything you do for yourself is directly impacting this baby. It just takes a couple minutes a day. Allow people to help you. Allow yourself to eat well so that you can give the most to this little tiny person that you created. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.